I think today I'd like to talk about Codex. Have you heard about Codex before?
I have, of course, yeah.
Now, this seems to me, at least, it feels like one of those co-pilot names that's being used for a lot of things. So I've heard about Codex, but I thought it was one thing. And then the more I Googled or searched to try to find documentation around what I was looking for, it turned out that it's a few things. So what I was looking for was the Codex CLI. Is that what you were thinking of when I said Codex?
Until recently, that's pretty much all I associated it with. It
Okay.
was the code.
Okay.
When I say Codex CLI, I know that was a mistake on my part, but also other people were saying that same thing. And it wasn't until recently that I realized, oh no, there's actually a Codex, and then there's Codex CLI, and now there's
Right.
there's even new things now. So I'm glad you're going to be able to straighten out.
Yeah, you got it. And I think I know it. So again, if you need to hit me up if I'm wrong, but my understanding is OpenAI released Codex CLI quite a while ago, and it was called Codex. People just called it Codex because it was
Mhm.
the only thing. At some point in time, there was an extension released for VS Code, Cursor, and Windsor, also called Codex. And then I think there was also a model, like I know there was actually a model released recently called the GPT-5 Codex, which is what I think caused a little bit of confusion recently because it's actually fairly good for coding. Now, there is one more that I had not played around with, and it's called ChatGPT Codex. Have you heard of this one before, or GPT Codex
I
Cloud?
I
Oh,
just
okay. I
stumbled
had
upon
not.
it
Okay.
this week. Yeah, I was actually trying to go in and spend a little time with ChatGPT because I haven't recently, just to be honest. And so I went in there to just see what's new, check out some of the GPTs that we have locally, internally on our team, because that was kind of interesting. And yeah, I was like, what is this thing? So I didn't really spend any time with it. I did ask it to build me a simple little HTML app, and it did it just fine.
Okay.
But yeah, I need to come back and revisit it a little bit more.
I think I definitely need to use it as well. My understanding is that it's the agentic coder within OpenAI's ChatGPT. So essentially, if you want to do a coding task, you're supposed to click it under the agents. Again, I probably need to update my client. I haven't played with it, but I figure it would be good to demystify this a little bit. So recently, I guess the big sort of announcement was that ChatGPT 5 hyphen codex was released. I'm saying this carefully because I don't want to mess up the name because it's like an extension of GPT-5, which I already thought was pretty good at coding, full disclosure. I realize I may have been in the minority. I still do use it for quite a bit of coding tasks just on the medium setting, just because I can use quite a bit of it. I didn't think it was a competitor to Sonnet 4. And I feel like with the Codex addition to it, it actually is maybe not neck and neck, or at least I'm not familiar enough with it, but it's comparable. And it does seem just like GPT-5 to hallucinate less, which is phenomenal because that's my biggest problem with some of these agents. So I figured what I'd first do is talk about the news source that I got this from, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So this is Codex. I'm just going to switch tabs here just a little bit. So I've been following this blog or podcast or what have you called Latent Space. It comes out in multiple different formats. And they actually had an interview with Greg Brockman recently that I watched that was pretty good. So it's on YouTube. I'll quickly go through here. There's a video at the end. But basically, the long and the short of this was that this app has changed. Oops, my apologies. Has changed quite a bit. So it used to be written in, I think, TypeScript using something called Ink. And recently it was rewritten in Rust using a framework called Ratatui. Now, I only mention this just because I realize a lot of people are interested in those CLI frameworks. And we've talked a little bit about other apps such as Open Code, Gemini CLI, and of course, Claude Code itself in terms of what they're using. If you want to build your own, what would that look like? So they're using Ratatouille and Rust, which is, I think, new to me. I've not seen any of these other tools written in it. And there are a few wrinkles to the way it works, as well as some things that just aren't supported or you would expect are there that are a little bit different, basically. So one of the main ones for me was having using Open Code for quite a bit. Is there a way for me to use different models? So I'll get to Ollama in a bit, but of all the models you can use, it's really just two. So there's GPT-5 and there's GPT Codex. And then the main thing that you need to differentiate between here is just how much reasoning is involved. Now, you won't see any other models in here. I will talk a little bit about adding Ollama or LM Studio, et cetera, at the end. But basically, just assume that this is primarily built for talking to OpenAI ChatGPT models. That's its main thing. Now, one thing that I missed from this is you probably do this all the time, but -C in Claude Code, if you want to continue a session, I'm still in the minority using like longer sessions to do things. I realize that's not the best for context, but I'll generally try to finish a thought and then start a new one. So I tend to continue quite a bit just because it could be a couple days. What I'm working through right now is a lot of test fakes, PRs, issues, that kind of thing. A way to do that in the docs, at least, that I thought was pretty important to point out. So if we just exit here, in the docs, it said you should be able to do resume like so. It does not work, unfortunately, but I did find out if you do resume like this, you can actually find all your old sessions. So you can see this morning I've been playing with this for about 3 hours. But if we go into one of these sessions here, I'll talk a little bit about some of the options. One of the ones that's very similar to other apps, such as Claude Code or Gemini, is the init. And what init will do is create an agents.md file. Now, agents.md is maybe new for some people who haven't used tools like Aider or what have you, but agents.md is more like a, let's call it like an open source way to talk about agents for many different CLI apps or many different IDEs. So instead of creating this and having to re-init every time you move to a different tool, I guess the hypothesis is, what if we had a standardized format that we could put it in that everything uses? That way we don't have to reinvent the wheel the next time we come with a new IDE. So that's what this will create. And the agents.md is pretty cool, but basically it's the same as the Claude.md or what have you. It's more, I just want to point out the standardization, which I thought was pretty interesting. Now, in here, it's got the agents file, of course. If we get out of here, though, I just want to point out one more thing. So it's not obvious in the UI itself, and I'll show you how in a moment here. But if we want to do something like an MCP server change, for example, so I'm just going into my home folder under .codex, and then what I'm going to do is look at this config toml file. So toml is generally you'd see this in Rust, but it's a config file of an ini file. And what I'm doing here is saying two things. One, I've added an MCP server, and the other is the first time I opened up this project, I told it to trust it. I'm going to talk about security here in a moment, but in terms of the MCP, I've added sequential thinking. Now, I'm really not sure this is necessary with GPT-5 because it seems to follow from one thought to another on its own, where I find that Sonnet 4 will do it once in a while, and definitely like Llama 3 or GLM or what have you, that definitely have an issue. Well, it will stop and you end up just typing continue quite a bit, so it's pointless. Now, the trust level's in here, so we set to trusted, but we'll quickly go back into the UI and we'll look at what that MCP server looks like when we get in there. If we go back into the resume here, it's going to show you the menu for MCP. Again, it's nothing fancy, but if we go in, we can actually look at the tools that are being used, which is important because we want to know if they're loaded, basically. One thing that I noticed about this tool compared to others that I didn't really like is when you open it up, it's initializing the MCP server, but you might not get feedback on that server being loaded until you actually go through and send some context through or send through a query, and then you'll see it loading if there's a problem or what have you, but you don't notice that right away. So it could be if you've got 5 or 6 MCP servers, it might take them a minute to start up. Context 7, for example, I find is sometimes a little bit slow. When you're starting those up, you may try to use them. They're not ready to be used, or perhaps they're not working properly. The format's a little bit different in this command. You can see that it's got, at the very end of these arguments, it's got MCP, T, and standard IO. So it's basically saying run this in MCP mode, but also accept things on standard IO. Now, this isn't the same for every server, so it's going to be a little bit, let's say, hit or miss when you're trying to adapt your MCP server to Codex CLI, unfortunately. But I think the main thing is if you add these 3 parameters on the end of the arguments, you should be okay. So it's MCP -T or -T, and then STDIO, so standard IO. All right, so we talked a little bit about MCP servers, some quick setup. I think this will probably get most people where they need to be. Now, for me, one of the problems that I had was with approvals. So approvals are very similar to other applications, and it's just like, are you canceling allow? Are you in YOLO mode? What are you doing? Like when commands run, are you allowing them to run, or are you deciding that you want to attach each of them? So there's some people on our team, for example, who want to essentially approve every command that goes through, and it depends on what you're working on. I totally understand it. Most of the time when I'm just making things up or starting from whole cloth, what I want to do is basically do auto. So just run most of the commands, maybe no deletions if you could, that'd be great, but you can go and edit files, what have you. So I've got this set to auto, and I just want to talk a little bit about the sandbox as well. Now, I'm not sure if the sandbox has, I didn't think so. But what I can do is show you the status, and we'll talk about the sandbox here. So what Codex runs in is in sandbox mode, and it tries to protect your computer from this AI model that's currently like coding on your computer. So you can see in here, it's got the approval mode set to on request. So when it requests things, I'll approve it. The sandbox it's in is workspace write. So it can write to this workspace, but nothing outside of this workspace, which could actually be a problem. In particular, for me, most of my tests are running in Docker, and running those tests is actually impossible. There's no way to do it that I can figure out on macOS to get this working. Now, there are workarounds, of course. You can add file folders, exclusions, and things like that. I didn't have any luck, and I'll talk about how to work around this. But basically, there are some other parameters in here. So the model that we're using, and note that it's not Codex. It's GPT-5, and I'll talk about how to make that default in a second. And then you can see the CLI version, token usage, our session ID, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so in terms of the approval, one thing that I found that actually worked pretty well, and I hate to recommend this, is YOLO mode. I realize this comes with maybe some baggage. Maybe some of you have been burned by this before, but I'll talk about how we could actually make that a little bit different. So if we did look at some of these commands here, so there's YOLO mode, but there's also the real command that's dangerously bypass approvals in sandbox. YOLO is just a shortcut to that. Sorry, it took a moment to pull that up. But I just want to make sure, like, I want to underscore how dangerous this could be, because I actually think the sandbox is a great idea. Now, the way I work is generally I'll put this on a sandbox computer and run on there. So if anything gets removed, it's not the end of the world. And I have everything stored in GitHub. But if you're having problems with Docker and you decide to turn this on, I would suggest thinking through what you're doing first, just to make sure there's no gotchas or footguns hidden in there. But you want to make sure that you're protected. So if you need to get past it, this is how you do it. So it's dangerously bypass approvals or -- YOLO mode. Now, there's a few other things in here that I want to talk about. So once we're in it, we'll check the status. So we just landed this in YOLO mode essentially. So we should see the sandbox is dangerful access, and we can see that the approval mode is set to never. So it's definitely taken effect. Now, the other is what we probably want to do is use that new model. So I've been using GPT-5 Codex quite a bit, as mentioned. I've been using the medium, I guess, reasoning level. The reason I have is because of cost. My understanding is high will burn through your credits more quickly, and I'm on the $20 a month plan. So I don't have the $200 a month plan, but at medium, running for about 4 hours at this point in time, I've yet to hit that limit. Whereas with Claude, I already hit it this morning, just playing around with the same repo. So it seems to give me a little bit more usage than Claude Code. And it's difficult for me to compare the two and say that this is better than the other, but it seems to be equivalent for what I'm doing and supports most of the tools that I need. I will say it's got -- search if you want to do a web search. I did not find the web search to be helpful at all. But one thing I found pretty interesting, is that you can add this to Claude Code. So I'm going to paste a command here, but I'll explain what I'm doing first. All I'm doing is saying in Claude Code, add codex as an MCP server. Now, I won't go into this too much, but imagine a Claude could actually call this server in order to do JAS. Now, I haven't done this in Claude yet, but I have actually experimented with this in Windsurf using the exec mode. So you can actually pass through just like Claude Code, say exec this with this model and do this. And I said, hey, if you're having a hard time or if you think this is correct, have Codex double check it for you. So what I would normally do in a prompt is assess your answer. Please look at any assumptions that you've made, see if there are any false positives or false negatives, and then give me the rational next steps as a result. Because I found that, at least in Claude Code, it's very sycophantic, or it tends to glaze and tell you things are great, everything's fantastic, this is production ready, it's ready to scale, your thousands of users will be lined up the door. Whereas in truth, a lot of times, like, there's typos in the test and things like that still need to be fixed. So what I found is being able to have it double check is where it helps. What I was doing this morning is basically passing this through and saying, hey, use this to do it. Now I'm going to hit enter here. It will probably fail because I've added it previously. Yeah, so there's already an MCP server in the config. If you have this problem for any reason, just what I just did, you can do remove. And then in this case, we typed in codex. So we can do that. There you go. And we'll add back in. Anyway, just a quick example to show that you can use this as an MCP server in Claude. The other is that there's a Python project that will allow you to use Ollama models in this. Now, I've only had luck using, I think it's called GPT-OSS is what I was using. Okay, and then to link these, what you can do is just run Python 3 and then your file, which is Codex CLI linker. Now, when I do this, I'm going to quickly go back and revert my config.toml because this is going to mess up my config. But if you're on a plane and you want to continue using this tool with a local model, here's how. I found this out pretty handy. It will essentially set up everything for you. It'll do like an endpoint as well as the model and the reasoning. But basically, as we're going through this, it will say, hey, what do you want to use? I've got Ollama installed and running locally on this computer, so that's what I'm going to pick. And that is the default. And then it's telling me what available models I have. So I've loaded these myself. I would caution against anything other than GPT-OSS 20B at this point in time, mostly because the other model is massive and it probably won't fit on your laptop or your computer. The other is that the tool calls, at least in my experience, didn't work with any of these other models that I have loaded, which is pretty common. So Llama 3, Llama 3.2, or DeepSeek Coder. I've also seen people talking about R1 not working as well. It's just that the way tool calls are done are a little bit different, but we're going to pick GPT-OSS, and then I'm going to pick untrusted, and we're going to pick, so this, you can pick whatever you want. It's just going to be minimal here, just because it doesn't really support reasoning effort in GPT-OSS. But for the reasoning summary, I'm just going to pick 2 for concise, and then we're going to go for high verbosity, and then workspace right, and then show the reasoning. Okay, so all of this is set up, and then we should be able to do codex, resume, and resume what we are currently doing, so that whole context, and then ask things like, what's next? Now, this is going to take a while. I apologize because it's running locally, but I'll see if I can at least show yeah, you can see it's already running a little bit slow here, but I'm just going to try to bring this over, and we'll show the GPU status once it's loaded. I'll bring this over. So you can see there's a bunch of stuff running, but this Ollama task here, and you can see that it's actually just ramped up. It's actually consuming memory. This isn't really important, but I do want to make sure, because it's kind of smoke and mirrors, that you can actually see this is in fact running locally. That's why it's so slow. This will probably take about a minute to come back. And this laptop has, I think, 32 gigabytes of memory. It's an M1 Max from Apple, but it's pretty good. Okay, so it went through, it gave you an answer. Again, it's not going to break any speed records or anything like that, but it's certainly like an alternative that you could use. Okay, I think I covered most of the stuff. So we covered resumed, we covered some of the other things that are out there. I talked about approvals, I talked about the new model, and we talked about using it as an MCP. I think that covers most of what I wanted to talk about. Now, there are definitely different features and things like that in here, but if you want to use this as a Claude Code replacement, which is what I was looking for, I think I've mentioned this a few times, this is an option. It will allow you to use OpenRouter the same way I was just using Ollama, but I feel like it's the best use case for this is GPT-5 Codex. I've been having pretty good luck with it.
Okay. Awesome. Definitely another nice tool for the toy box.
Of course. Yeah. I think I'm still waiting for like is it CLI IDE Bastion that we were talking about before? But it does feel like at some point in time, you need some host that you can get to, maybe in Docker or something like that, house all these tools for you, because it is handy hopping between them. So I will say Claude Code is still my favorite. It's nice to have alternatives because the market's heating up.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, thanks so much, Ryan. We'll see you in the next one.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. Have a good one.